Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Thanks to TriBooth, the best vocal booth for home or on-the-road voice recording. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, learner!
Here we go.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite, thanks to the TriBooth. Don't forget the code PAP200 to get $200 off. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. This week we're talking about Nexus, which is kind of timely because if you are going to buy Nexus, I think you get 20% off until June 30. Is that right, Robert?
There is. Someone sneaked one by. We usually don't do sales.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
Ah. Well.
Better hurry up and get this cut and out on the air.
Yeah.
Or out on the pod.
Exactly. Now, you brought something up the other day, George, about Nexus, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but you discovered something that got you out of trouble.
Well, I got one of my clients out of trouble. I didn't even have to do
With
it.
an Apollo.
Yeah, it was an Apollo. What do you know? If there's going to be confusing audio drivers, it's probably Apollo related. And it definitely was. So yeah, in this case, this was what really, really out there situation where the user was getting the virtual inputs to work on the Apollo for most things, even on Chrome. However, and this is on a Mac, by the way, when he played a video on YouTube, it ignored the routing through the virtual channels and it would only show up on the monitor channels. I have absolutely no way to understand. I don't understand what's going on under the hood in Chrome enough to even understand how a different website could route audio in a different way in the same browser, but that's precisely what was happening. And so he was clever enough, smart enough, and patient enough to try solutions. And the one that worked for him was using Nexus. He said, when I used Nexus to essentially pound the Apollo drivers, that fixed the problem. Now everything's fine. Robert, does that make any remote sense at all?
I'm trying to understand exactly what he did. So I think what he was trying to do is get his web browser to play.
So a very common
his
scenario with the
Apollo?
Apollo, because I'm very intimately familiar with these issues, is the Apollo has virtual sound drivers for different outputs. So they're called virtual outputs, right? So if you hit play on any WAV file on any machine, and the default channels on the Apollo it's going to come out of are monitor, left, right, your speakers. That's fine, unless you want it to go anywhere else. Then it's useless. So if you want it to go to headphones, if you want it to go to an aux send, if you want it to go to literally any place else in the system, it doesn't help you.
Right.
Right. Now it's going up on a virtual channel, and now
Because
you
it
can
shows up
send
in the
it somewhere
Apollo
else. You can
console.
send it to an aux channel.
Exactly.
Right. And now it's routable and,
So what were the apps that he was successfully using with the virtual?
really everything. Pretty
Name
much
them.
everything.
What
Pretty
were
much
they
everything,
again?
right? Well, I'm trying to find right now I'm trying to navigate to my own Facebook group. I posted this whole thing on Universal Audio Apollo for VoiceOver on Facebook, my Facebook group for people using the Apollo for VoiceOver. And I posted it about this whole thing. And the crux of it, and it's pretty long. I'll try to summarize. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. This development suddenly happened without warning a couple days ago after 2 years of no problems. All audio from the Mac, Skype, Source Connect, Zoom, and all audio from websites on Chrome all route through the virtual channels. Okay? That actually doesn't always work, for the record. He's getting that to work. But when I play a YouTube video on Chrome and Safari,
Only YouTube.
Only
Hear the website.
Only YouTube on
so weird.
Chrome and Safari. I hear the audio in the monitor, but I cannot see levels in the virtual channels in the console or Pro Tools. It just happened poof, out of the blue, and it is not resolved after rebooting several times over the last couple of days. And then the next post is his solution.
Before we do the solution, the first thing is the problem, or the way he solved it the first time is he went into the audio MIDI application and he set, because the virtual channels in the Apollo are not channels 1 and 2, they're channels like 5 and 6, I think. Okay. So
That's
you
right.
got to basically tell the Mac that your output for monitoring is not 1 and 2 of your built-in speakers or even 1 and 2 of the Apollo. Your output is 1 and 2 of the
Right.
Of the Apollo. And I don't know, George, if you know what I'm talking about this, where you set your speakers and you can.
Oh yeah, dude, I've done
Right.
this hundreds of times. Like I literally have a web page about setting.
So
this up for
somehow
people.
like YouTube is ignoring that, but
YouTube is ignoring that specifically, and it's ignoring it on Safari and in
so
Chrome.
if his goal was to bring the, YouTube back up into his Apollo console, then I don't see how Source-Nexus does that directly. But I do see how Nexus gets it into his DAW, and his DAW goes over to his Apollo console, or out his Apollo.
Well, what he said was routing through Source-Nexus seems to cure all ills. I have not done an exhaustive test, but preliminary tests with YouTube are successful in routing audio to virtual tracks through Source-Nexus. The problem only occurs when routing audio from the Mac to Apollo through the sound preferences and audio MIDI setup utility in Mac OS. So after clicking around the desktop and internet, I found some audio shows up in virtual tracks and some does not. And then he goes on and literally goes down by website, every website he found that does work and doesn't work. Like what does work? CNN and Fox. What does not show up in the virtual channels? YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Netflix, HBO, and Peacock. So it is website specific, what actually shows up in the virtual channels.
So how did he end up using Nexus to solve it?
He didn't go into a breakdown of his setup and how he did it. He said, I need to build new templates with more comprehensive Source-Nexus routing for conferencing anyway. It seems routing the computer's audio through Source-Nexus will fix this specific problem as well. So the bypass will hopefully make this discussion moot in daily practice, but it sure would be interesting if someone knows enough about the architecture involved to offer an explanation for why this might have occurred.
I can't explain how any website is picking off audio interfaces individually. I thought maybe it has to do with, I don't even know, really, because none of those.
And this is on Mojave, by the way. This is Mojave.
Yeah, I run Mojave all the time. I've never, but I don't use Apollos. I mean, I have Apollo at the studio, but yeah.
I have one sitting right here. I have been using Apollos, configuring them, setting up systems around them for 10 years. Like, I feel like I've known every annoying quirk, every defect, every bonus feature of the Apollo inside and out. And then this comes at me from left field.
I mean, basically what he's doing is he's moving before everything was brought back to the Apollo console, and the only inputs were Apollo inputs. Like that's the way the Apollo system worked.
Right.
By moving it over to his workstation and using Nexus, he still has a mixer to route stuff around and do whatnot with. And his inputs are, again, all the inputs from the Apollo, because the Apollo gives them to the workstation, but also every other input now, because Nexus can see everything.
Right.
It's just interesting how one website could decide that. I really have no idea how that is. And it doesn't matter what browser even.
Well, that's really blew my mind. I was like, okay, I can see if that happens in Chrome. He says the same thing happens in Safari. And then that's where I was like, insert.
I was like, is this some sort of like digital rights management thing? I was thinking about that with like Netflix or something.
It has to be a DRM
I don't know
thing.
how it knows.
Right? It has to be some bit that's
it's like,
on
I'm
the
not going to
signal
go to a virtual thing because virtual things maybe can be recorded.
Right.
That's a wild guess, but just a rough guess.
That's what it sounds like.
Isn't that crazy? So the fix was Nexus because now he was able to set, again, he didn't go into detail about how he's using Nexus, but how Nexus works.
He said
make a virtual
Mac
driver
Nexus,
and then you set Mac OS to speakers to Nexus, whatever Nexus A or whatever Nexus driver. And that is a way to route around this. This problem.
I'll give you a little trick if you want. You can also, if you wanted to go to your speakers sometimes, but not all the time, you can also route it to a dual output device. So you know how you have aggregate devices you also have dual output devices.
That's right.
Right. You can make an output that's Nexus and your Mac speakers. And so now you don't have to if you're not running your DAW, you still get it out your Mac speakers. If you are running your DAW, mute your Mac speakers and you get it out your DAW.
I know enough about sound drivers to know that I don't understand a lot about what's going on. And I also know that they're very, very different in Mac OS and Windows, right? There's a company making a hardware mixer that you can put on your desk that lets you mix any channel, any software source on a Windows machine. So in other words, imagine you have like a touch surface thing on your desktop, and pulling down fader 1 is Chrome. Pulling down fader 2 is another application, right? And that's something you can do natively in Windows that you cannot do natively.
No, you need
in Mac.
and you need something like what's like Rogue Amoeba makes. It's not loopback. It's the other thing, Sound Desk or something.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
You can control the volume of applications.
Sound Desk gets really interesting and complicated.
you can get to the volume of individual applications and control them. Usually what happens there is that they pick off all the applications and then they send it out to your speakers. So it's like kind of like sending a driver to a driver because you have to change the mix.
Yeah.
I think there's some level of doing that or some pass from one to the other. Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
There's definitely the ability to tap individual applications, and there's sort of good ways and bad ways to do that. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes loopback is tough, because loopback can really get its fingers into a system and make it do weird things because it's not really audio hijack. They go about it in a powerful way because without you doing anything, they just sense all the audio applications that are going and they just grab hold of everything. Right. But at the same time, it's really invasive and you can destabilize things, and sometimes it can make weird things happen.
I think these systems are great for hobbyists and video game streamers, people that are hackers and computer builders and people that thrive on customizing a system. But I think these systems are in general are a bad idea for a production studio or a voiceover, even a home voiceover studio, where if something falls apart, it will take your studio offline and you won't know what to do to fix it other than completely start over or remove it entirely and then have to then redesign your workflow on the fly. And this is why I never, ever recommend building a home voiceover booth around virtual sound drivers like loopback. I'm more likely going to recommend Nexus because it was designed in a different way to not be as invasive, and it has a support team around it. You know, you guys at Source Elements. So it was designed with pro audio as a number one. It kind of meets the
pro audio people where they're at. So there it is as a plugin in your workstation, instead of here's this thing like, oh, if you want to use that, you got to change your whole audio driver to us. But no, it's true that there's a big need to run virtual devices all over the place. And I mean, sometimes I've got so many of them going on. It's crazy. Here's a really funny troubleshooting thing that I ran into a while ago. If you remember, for a while, Pro Tools native prevented you from having more than 32 inputs. That's the way Avid was going to make you buy the hardware.
Oh, I remember that.
And so we were doing this massive workflow and we ended up with more than 32 virtual devices. Like, even though they weren't being used by Pro Tools, the fact that there was that many virtual devices, Pro Tools is like, like, I'm going to be weird and I'm not going to output anything. And it all had to do with how many virtual devices, because Pro Tools was trying to essentially do some sort of like, I'm not going to do that thing. And it ended up getting in the way. So there's interactions that happen with these things, and you need to run a lot of devices in some situations. I think for a home voiceover, reasonably, you're talking about probably 3 or 4 devices. I mean, maybe you have Source Connect. You have a general communications like Skype, and then you have a phone patch. Maybe a fourth one like to monitor a web browser in your DAW or something, so you can play stuff for your clients.
Well, a perfect example of how Nexus changed things, well, for me anyway, even doing podcasts, right? I've been doing podcasts a long time before this one. And I always recorded a backup, but it always had to be in Pro Tools, right? So I would send all the channels that I was recording to a stereo bus and then off and into another channel and just record a stereo mix. But it always seemed stupid to me because if I ever lost the session, I'd lost the backup anyway. But now with Nexus, all of a sudden, not only have I now got 3 Source Connect connections running, plus Source Connect now, I'm also sending a stereo mix to Audition in the same computer to record my backup, which is getting backed up into Dropbox in the cloud. So, I could never have done that before.
Right. And then we could say, hey, Robbo, can you go to YouTube and play us something? And
yeah, right. Exactly.
With one aux channel and a switch of your sound device in your system preferences, and we can be hearing you go through YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
You know how I did that stuff in the old days? Is I would install separate audio interfaces for
devices.
Each feature. Like I'd have a sound card or USB device just for Zoom, for example.
Yep. You use those Behringers.
Yeah, the UCA 202.
Yeah. Well, the podcast I always did had like the host on Source Connect now connected to me, and then the guest would always be on Skype or Zoom or whatever. So I had to use my laptop for that connection and have a physical audio connection to Pro Tools to record the interview. Whereas now it's all in the box. So yeah, it massively changed my workflow.
Well, that's funny because that's what I did a session last night, and I've done a few of these where I have both machines going. So I'm capturing audio on the big machine and then using Zoom through the laptop.
You better hit up Robert for a Nexus account then.
Yeah, we now have Nexus for Windows. We've had it for a year.
You do, that's right. Yeah.
Are there any limitations or ways that the Windows Nexus is crippled or even possibly better than the Mac version on some level?
It's not better because Windows.
Right.
So what it looks like, the plugin is exactly the same. That one of the differences, you know how there's Nexus control and you can just be like, conjure me up an audio device, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in Windows, you have to run the installer and you have to install as many audio devices as you want.
I see.
It's like it has to happen in the installation process.
Gotcha.
So then once you have your virtual devices, to name them, you have to go like Windows Sound, Preferences, Properties. Then you go into them and you can name them. And even after you name them, they still retain some portion of the default name that they were assigned, which makes all the names really long. And then pretty much it's all the same with every application except for those that need ASIO. So we don't have an ASIO device. We have I call them WhatsApp devices, but you know what I'm talking about? Like Windows.
Wasapi.
Wasapi, yeah, Wasapi, whatever. We used to use ASIO for all. I don't know, George, are you familiar with ASIO for all? Okay. But for whatever reason, ASIO for all didn't work. So now we use Flex ASIO, which is way more flexible.
Uh-huh.
And for most things, you can just install it. And there's like a little page we have where you install it and you have to like, you set your whole sound preferences to that. There's 2 ways, or you use this text file that we give you.
Oh, this is something you have to get from GitHub. This is not like super user-friendly.
Right. You don't actually like we have a link there that goes to GitHub, but you don't really have to go to GitHub, but we give you a file. And then that's exactly where it is like to get like the full breadth of it. If you're dealing with anything that's ASIO drivers, you got to deal with this Flex ASIO thing, which once you get it set up, you're like, okay, done. And now it all works the same.
Yeah.
But getting over that freaking hump is a little bit annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, once you've gone through that more painful setup process, you can get the same level of performance, the same functionality, the same latency, all that kind of stuff, essentially.
All that. Yeah. You send any app to any app, send any app into your workstation, out of your workstation to any app. You don't need the one that everyone was using prior to that was, I think they call it virtual cables, and there's like potato and banana.
Yeah. And voice meter, potato and banana. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know. People use this stuff. Yeah.
So that's a lot more. That's basically like the loopback of Windows, right?
Yes.
And so again, using that one, you're like, oh, if I want to use this with my audio workstation, I have to change my whole audio workstation over to this virtual device. And then it virtually feeds the inputs and outputs. Whereas Nexus being a plugin, it's much easier to not disturb your whole setup. It doesn't make you change your audio device for your workstation. It lets you add in those inputs and outputs on the plugin level to your workstation instead of on the driver level.
Here's a missing feature, right? And this is not... this is something I've wanted for a while, and you're going to tell me, why would you want that? Okay.
Why would you want that, George?
Exactly. So, in Twisted Wave, it's a destructive single track editor, right? If I want to process audio, it's always done post, and it's done through a stack, and I'm really good at that. And I have that dialed, right? I would like to make a pre-input stage stack, and I would like to route that in through something like Nexus. So I'd like Nexus to host.
In Reaper.
Well, I know I can do that in Reaper, but I don't want to use Reaper. I want to use Twisted Wave.
Hear me out. Make your stack in Reaper.
Yeah.
And Reaper is actually highly customizable. So if you take the time, you can like rip its GUI down to nothing.
Yes, you can.
Okay. And then at the end of your plugin stack in Reaper is a Source-Nexus plugin. And then go to Twisted Wave and make Source-Nexus your input.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that would work. And there's been solutions. I want a George the Tech approved solution that is really simple, that anybody I can send a link, say click, boom, here you go. Now, I know with Reaper, I can send a preset file with Reaper and it would essentially do the same. It just, when I bring Reaper into the mix, it still feels like a bit of a house of cards. I've got Reaper involved. I've got hardware configuration to set up in Reaper. I've got Nexus involved. And then I've got Twisted Wave involved as well. And a lot of the reason people use Twisted Wave is that it's not complicated. So this is just a wish list item. I know there's ways to make it work.
Very achievable.
But this is a wish list thing for me. So just saying, if anybody at Source Elements is listening out there, hello, is anybody listening out there? I want a that thing.
Okay. And you want this
kind of like the Waves
Mac
thing
and Windows.
You know that Waves thing where they call it Sound Rack? Is that what it's called?
DigiRack?
I know what you're talking about.
Waves has a host that will host all the Wave plugins for you. And then that host can be used standalone. You know what I'm talking about? Is it called Is it called DigiGrid? Is that what it's called?
DigiGrid, that's it.
DigiGrid.
Yeah. So I want a DigiGrid that's universal, that runs any plugin from anybody and can then insert that chain into any DAW without using another DAW to build the chain. That's what I want. So I'm just saying. And now you can edit all that out because I don't want anybody to steal my idea.
well, no. I'm just gonna show you how to do it right now.
Show us on this podcast, would you please? That'd be so useful.
Well, where's the download?
Yeah, that's right. You know that idea, that secret one you had? Well, yeah.
No, I think that one sound mixer app from Mac that you mentioned earlier, I think it does host plugins. I think it can do it.
Which app did I mention?
You mentioned one of these virtual mixers for Mac OS that has a lot of sound routing capabilities. And right now its name is I can't remember the name of it. Sound Studio, Sound Desk. Sound Desk?
Sound Desk maybe.
Sound Desk.
I think that was
Sound Desk. That's the one. I've played around with
I'm trying
Sound
to find
Desk.
There's a very simple one that Apple makes. And
really?
I'm trying to find it's called, I think it's literally called AU Host. But I'm trying to find the actual download.
It would be funny if it had been made like 15 years ago by Apple.
It has been made 15 years ago by Apple.
And it's just kind of just slipped into the darkness because it's who the hell who would ever want something like this?
AU Labs is a free digital audio mixing application that hosts audio unit effects and that ships with Apple developer tools. So it comes with the developer tools because basically what it is the testing environment for AU plugins. And so it hosts AU plugins, which everything you want to use is available as an AU plugin.
I've seen it.
It's done.
You know what we say about us engineers? We've forgotten more than we've learned, right?
I'm just trying to figure out how to download it.
I have seen it before. It's very old.
I've downloaded it before too.
It's very old. So something like this in conjunction with Nexus that would work.
So here's the rub. Ready? Sign into Apple with your developer ID.
Gotcha. So we need to convince Apple that this is something that should exist for the end user.
Yeah, and what's going to happen is but then we want it for VST and AU, and Apple's only going to do it for AU.
Yeah,
of course.
And now that I'm looking on this website, kvraudio.com, it says here are products similar to AU Lab, and now I'm guessing a whole another world of
pain.
There's a whole bunch of them.
Meta plugin is one of them. Meta plugin. Magma. Yeah. Okay. This stuff's out there. You just have to know where to dig and what Google string of, what to type into Google to find it, I guess.
Right. And also for you, it's finding one that is actually stripped down enough.
Yeah. Here's one called
a lot of them are going to be
plugin.
A lot of them are like they want to be instrument hosts. So you find this genre of plugin a lot where it's like, I want to play my keyboard, my vintage piano sound.
Right.
And I just want an amp. I don't want to launch a whole DAW.
Exactly.
So they make it, but then they make it bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah. I need a really light version. It's just really, really straightforward. It's just the problem with what we do serving the voiceover community. It's a very underserved niche of the audio production world, I feel like. And like when you go to trade shows like NAMM and AES and everything, it is still like a grossly ignored niche. Now, podcasting is not. So when I was at NAMM, there was a tremendous amount of talk around podcasting tools and solutions and, softwares and microphones and mixers and on that were all around live streaming, video game streaming, et cetera. There was even pan-tilt zoom camera companies at NAMM this year selling video cameras, right? So
at NAMM,
right? So they know there's this mashup of industries, like stuff you would see only at NAB were at NAMM this year, right? So it was interesting that they're understanding that this is a really big part of being successful as an artist is you have to be online and you have to be streamed and you have to be seen. So there's a lot more tools out there. But anyway, this has inspired me. I'm going to look further into this. I'm going to check out these tools you mentioned and reminded me of because I forgot all about AU Lab.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about podcasting, though, because what would be a bigger industry? Would it be podcasting or would it be voiceover?
Well, what would be a bigger industry that produces profit for the producer of the product? That would be my question. So
voiceover.
I'd have to say voiceover, right? Because you get a direct payment for a service rendered. Podcasting traditionally is completely supported by either donation or advertising. So it's far, far more difficult for a podcast to raise money, as we are probably somewhat aware. It's way, way more difficult to do it. And it's not that it's not happening, and there's more and more podcasts actually making money now, but it's definitely a very different business model. But yeah, that's a damn good question. I mean, are there more people aspiring to or actually actively producing a podcast than there are voiceover actors aspiring to make a living in voiceover? That's a darn good question.
That's the question.
That is a really good question.
We're hedging our bets, or at least Andrew is. He's doing both.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So am I.
But I remember years ago when I was working on the casting website and getting all the statistics, and some of the numbers just blew my mind. One in particular was there were 250,000 people claiming to be voice actors in California alone.
Oh my gosh.
250,000 people claiming to be voice actors.
I think that's more of a statement about California.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We're full of aspiring everybody's in California.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you think about that, if you think about the numbers, like even if you think you're going to work in voiceover, you're going to have to buy an interface, you're going to have to buy a microphone and a pair of headphones. So if everybody, all of these people are buying stuff, that is a huge marketplace. And not one microphone company or headphone company or interface company even thinks about VoiceOver.
Well, here you go. This will blow your mind. There are, according to Google, there are over 2 million active podcasts on the internet today.
Yep.
So, I mean, how many microphones, interfaces, copies of Source Connect, blah, 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 is open to be sold out there at the moment too.
Well, have a look at Rode. I mean, they just released the Rodecaster Pro 2.
Yeah.
They must be selling a truckload of those things.
For sure. That thing is a dominant product. It's kind of created a genre.
I like this one.
Yeah, it's created a genre of itself. It's being knocked off by Tascam, Zoom, and other companies because it's an iconic. I would say that the Rodecaster Pro is an iconic piece of equipment.
Yeah. Well, there are radio stations here in Australia installing it as equipment, like not in the on-air studios, but in little editing production studios and editing suites and blah, blah, blah. They're buying them by the fistful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For good reason.
It's amazing. I mean, that Rode really smart because they own that territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do, don't they?
But there are others creeping in. I've heard some really good things about a Tascam competitor that has some things that the Rodecaster can't do, but now the Rodecaster 2 is out, so maybe it's going to now, dominate.
What's the big features on the Rodecaster 2?
I
can't remember either, but I know they've chucked a whole bunch of
has a 2
new stuff in there.
Well, first of all, the faders are software faders. I mean, they're physical, but they're all assignable.
They move.
No, they don't.
Okay,
they don't. They're just assignable. So there's 6 faders. There's actually fewer faders, but they're all assignable. So like you don't have to waste 3 faders on mics if you're one mic. So now you can make fader 3 be like a USB return and make fader 4 another return. It's an interesting, what they did was they shrunk the unit down physically a little bit because it doesn't have to have as many faders.
Do they charge less?
Nope.
It's $1,000 here in Australia.
Yeah,
Sounds
so
like about
$750 in America, I guess. $700. Yeah.
It's not cheap,
No, it's not cheap. And it's got some other tricks up its sleeve, like it has native onboard MIDI control capabilities. That was like an add-on for the old one, but now it's built into the unit. The trigger pads on the front natively out of the box act as switcher controllers, like for your video switcher. So you can use that to control your video switcher. So if you're doing live streams with multiple cameras, you can use the switch. All that stuff's now built in by design. Those are things that they sort of trickled in over 3 years on the original one, but now they're all native in the new one. And then there's a bunch of other. Of course, there's more bells and whistles, which right now I can't remember, but is it enough to go buy, if you have the old one, buy the new one? I don't know. I don't know if it's a big enough deal that you'd want to upgrade. Oh, I know what I remember now. The preamps have 70 dB of gain. That was one of their big party tricks. Yeah. So they went from about 55 or 53 or whatever it was dB to 70. So that was a biggie. Now they're like, you can actually plug in a Rode Podcaster mic into a Rodecaster Pro and actually get a usable signal.
Yeah, right.
Which you couldn't before. People were actually buying $100 mic and then plugging it into a $150 cloud lifter and plugging that into the mixer. It was the most ludicrous thing you've ever seen. I couldn't believe people were actually doing this. Well, now you don't have to because you can plug an SM7 into it or any dynamic mic and pretty much get all the gain you need. That was a big upgrade hardware-wise.
Yeah. But when you think about the price, I mean, I don't think it's expensive at all because if you look at things like, I've got the SSL2, for instance, I'm using now. That's what, $300 US, I think.
Yeah,
Is
almost.
that right?
It's gone up. It was like $229. Now it's like $270, something like that.
Yeah. And that's US dollars. And all you get is the two preamps.
That's it. There's not even a loopback. The SSL2, I love that thing. It has no effing loopback. I want a loop. It just doesn't have any. They can put a physical switch on it.
You got Nexus if you need a loop.
That's true. Bringing it back, going full circle. You've always got
done,
Nexus.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite, with thanks to Tribooth, and Austrian Audio, recorded using Source Connect, edited by Andrew Peters, and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging, with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.